Today's solo episode of Lone Star Lawyers is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search builds great teams by connecting lawyers in Texas with career opportunities at small and boutique law firms. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel Hare back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. Hope everyone's doing well. Today we are going to do a solo episode. So I've got a few topics and some things that I want to hit on today. And we're going to jump into those here in just a moment. But first, wanted to let you know about a few of the opportunities that we are currently searching for right now. We've got an insurance defense opportunity in Dallas, along with a couple of construction litigation positions and more general commercial litigation positions in Dallas. And then in Austin, continue to look for a family law attorney as well as a special education attorney. And then in Tarrant County and in Fort Worth, looking for a real estate lawyer as well as a family lawyer. And then in Houston, looking for an insurance defense lawyer there as well. So if any of these are of interest to you or maybe someone you know, please do have them get in touch with me, Daniel at varsitysearch.com. All right, as I said, we're going to be doing a solo show today, so no introduction needed. So let's hop right in. Thanks for joining us today on a Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. All right, well, I am excited to have the opportunity to just visit with you directly here. And so let's hop right in. Here are some of the things that I want to touch on today. One, I want to do a brief legal market update and just let you know what's happening, what I'm seeing in the legal market. I also want to take some time and just give you some thoughts and some tips on how to work productively with a legal recruiter, whether that's with Varsity or some other recruiting service or recruiting agency or person that you might choose to work with. Just want to give you some tips on that and answer some questions that I tend to get fairly often. And so hopefully that'll help you as you navigate your career path moving forward. And so want to do that as well. And so we'll cover some other things in the midst of those two. But those are two big buckets that want to get into today. Okay, so on the legal market front, as most of you who listen to this show regularly know, we work with and communicate with predominantly small and mid-sized law firms, as well as lawyers that are wanting to work at small and mid-sized law firms. Maybe that's moving from a larger firm to a smaller firm, or maybe it's just a kind of small firm to small firm type of transition. However, when we look at the legal market, the best research and data and analysis does tend to come from the big law side of things. And so I do think it's worth spending a few minutes on what's going on in big law, because while I tend to describe big law and really all other private law practice as essentially two different economies altogether, big law does have an impact on what happens in the small and mid-sized firm market for sure. And so I think it's relevant to discuss. And so I want to spend a few minutes on that, as well as just what I'm seeing in more of the small and mid-sized firm market. So on the big law market, it is a very active market. There is no question that if you look through the data, you read some of the articles that Above the Law and others write and comment on what's happening in the lateral market. It is robust and it is moving quickly at the partner level as well as at the associate level. And that's true in Texas as much or more so than anywhere across the country, as a lot of the large firms continue to either add to their footprint in Texas or create a Texas footprint, as we've seen in recent years. That trend is not slowing down anytime soon. And so that market is going quickly. And like I think most of the time that we look at this, there is a focus on the corporate side of the house, certainly, as Big Law typically moves in that direction, and more specifically on the M&A and the private equity side of the corporate practice. That's where a lot of the movement is happening. And so, a lot of folks that work in those areas are presented with a number of opportunities fairly often to switch big law firm to big law firm, even to go maybe from a mid-sized firm to a large firm in some of those areas because the need is so great. And so that's important to know. Another thing that's happening, as I was just mentioning, when we're talking about those large firms in Texas adding or growing their presence, we're seeing that even more so in Austin, where that's been a market that is still smaller than Houston and Dallas, particularly among large firms, but it's catching up. Firms are adding to their footprint in Texas by adding an Austin office, or at least putting some lawyers in Austin. We saw Quinn Emanuel do that in Austin this year to add to their footprint. They're looking at Dallas as well, and there are others certainly as Austin continues to attract startups and tech companies and those types of industry moving into Austin. So that'll continue to grow and continue to provide more opportunity for lawyers at the big firm level in Austin, where we haven't had historically nearly as many opportunities there as we have in the other two major markets. So that's important to know. Again, energy, technology, private equity, and IP tend to be the leading practice areas as these large firms in Texas are growing their footprints. So that's just good to keep in mind. We also had a merger that finalized this month. Holland Knight merging with Thompson Knight, the Texas-based firm. That was effective August 1st, and so we've had a lot of merger activity over the last 6 to 10 years. And so we had another big one here this month. The Texas-based firms are doing, I think, all they can do to kind of hang on in this storm, as they are and have been for a few years getting raided and poached by some of these national and international firms as they have come into Texas to make their big Texas plays. And so they're doing their best to do that. The other thing that's happening on the big law side is that salaries are again being increased at the big law level. And so we saw, for quite a while, salaries, I'm going back now, I guess about a decade or so, maybe 8 years ago or so, where they had been at 160, and then they moved to 180, and then they moved to 190, and we've been at 190 for, I guess, 3 or so years. And then the first domino fell on that salary within the last year and a half. And now a lot of the large firms have now gone to their starting salaries for first years at $205,000, and that scales over a course of an 8-year associate track up to $365,000. So from year 1 to year 8, going $205,000 to $365,000, and that's putting kind of your typical lateral hires. So what we look at is maybe like 3rd, 4th, 5th year lawyers now kind of squarely in that mid $200,000 range. If they're making a move out of big law in that time of their career, then that's about where they are salary wise, which is going to be interesting. I'll talk about that more in a little bit as it impacts small and mid-sized firms trying to grab some of those folks. Okay, so if that's what's going on at the big law level, how does that impact small and mid-sized firms? Well, as I mentioned earlier, I do tend to think of them as really different economies altogether, just the scale and scope and the price points of the services, the size of the client base in terms of the companies, It really is almost just two different economies, but they do impact one another. And so, one of the ways that I see this play out a lot is, there are quite a few small and mid-sized firms who like to try to grab that high-end talent out of the big firm at year 2, 3, 4, 5, somewhere in there. And often the pitch is, hey, look, you can come here. You won't make as much money initially, but you will have the opportunity to, take depositions, to handle hearings. Maybe it's to first or second chair, some different things, depositions, or if it's on the corporate side, be, second chairing deals or negotiations or whatever it might be, and kind of get you out of the back room doing doc review or discovery, or, kind of the 6th, 7th, 8th person on a negotiation deal team, whatever it might look like, and really get, kind of elevated levels of involvement and responsibilities and client contact and all that. And that works. I mean, there are plenty of you, I'm sure, if you've either been in the big firm world or you are right now, where that is appealing or that has appealed to you and encouraged you to make that leap out of big law and into more of a smaller, mid-size or boutique type environment. And, when salaries were starting at 190 for first years and then going to, maybe 215, 220 by year 3 or 4, taking a pay cut maybe to 150, 160 or something like that, it maybe hurts a little bit, but still, you're still young, still haven't quite maybe got used to the lifestyle of living off of $220,000 a year. Maybe you've paid off a lot of debt or been saving. And so, you can figure out how to make things work by if you take a pay cut down to 150, 160, something like that, where a boutique might be able to grab you. Well, now if those 3rd and 4th and 5th year lawyers are no longer at 220, but they're at 250 or 255 or something like that, now you're talking about $100,000 pay cut to go and do the smaller boutique or mid-sized firm thing. And there will probably still be people that will do that. But it does make it a little bit harder now. And that difference is going to make people think a little bit more. And so, I think it's going to be interesting to see whether smaller firms are able to not stay up with, because that's not the right way to think about it, because that's just not going to happen. But what can small firms do to make up some of that gap? And one of the ways that they've always done it is to say, hey, look, you're not going to make as much in the first year that you're here with us. But basically the argument is, or the pitch is, you will catch up with and pass over your counterparts at the big firm if you stay here, because you'll have the opportunity to become a partner at a younger stage. Frankly, you'll be able to you have a chance to be a partner, period, which is certainly not what happens with most associates at large law firms. Most do not become partners. So you'll have the chance to be a partner. You'll have the chance to develop business and also financially benefit from that business that you bring in. And you'll be able to take more home out of what you're billing than what you get to do at a large firm. So there is an argument that over the long term, meaning like maybe over the 7, 8, 9 year term, that you'll cross over, you'll make more, and you'll be set up to be a leader in your firm and a leader in your practice area. And by the time you're at the 10-year mark of practice, you'll have taken on a lot more responsibility. You'll have some trials under your belt, some deals under your belt, while your counterparts will not be partners at the big firm. They'll still be probably at a smaller firm because they will have had to do that, but they won't have had any of that experience that you had. And so that's always been a big part of the pitch, and it still will be. The question is, what else can be done? What else can smaller firms do to try to match what this pay increase at the big firm level does? Because it does make it harder. I mean, it's just, to give up $100,000 a year for a period of time, even just for a few years, is a lot to ask. And so I'll be interested to see how some of the boutiques that like to pull from large firms, how they respond. Now, obviously, when I'm saying that, there are a few boutiques out there that are essentially big firms just operating in a small firm environment. And so they already pay at or close to what big firms do. I'm not really talking about those firms. Those types of firms are going to continue to be able to do what they do. I'm really talking about everyone. That's only a handful of firms. I'm talking about everybody else that likes to grab some litigators hopping off the big law track. So that's going to be a challenge, I think, as we move ahead. The other thing that I'd say continue to see, and I was referencing it earlier with the big law update, is just the continued emphasis on corporate and deal and transactional and equity side of the house. That has been, where big law has been now for a while. Not that there's not big law litigation, there is. It's just, it's a lot, there are a lot fewer of those opportunities in terms of where the growth is. So litigation matters do tend to get pushed into the boutiques, whether they're the high-end sort of big law light boutiques or other small and mid-sized firms that do litigation. That's where things continue to go. Your blue chip companies obviously are still going to continue to use the large firm for most litigation matters as well as their deals. But almost every other company is going to look seriously at mid-sized and smaller firms, just because when they're looking at litigation, those are just out the door costs that aren't recouped and they're not part of a bigger deal. Like on the corporate side, when the legal fees are pennies on the dollar of what a deal can represent, it's just not the same. It does not have the same impact on the clients as it does on the litigation side, where it's just a cost center, so it's hard to justify, for some of these clients, the big firm rates. In fact, a lot of times when we see lawyers leave big firms to go to small firms, it's because they're about to lose clients that they really enjoy working with and enjoy representing and have enjoyed the relationships. And the rate structure of the big firm has just gotten such that those companies can no longer stay paying those rates for big firm lawyers. And so those big firm lawyers decide, hey, well, we'll hop off here, we'll go do our own firm or whatever, and you client, come with me and I'll be able to keep your rate, basically where it's been. And so that I think will continue to happen. And so that does create opportunities on the litigation side for folks in the small and mid-sized market, because more and more of high quality litigation business is going to be done in that small and mid-sized firm market. And so those are going to be opportunities to watch out for in the coming months and years ahead. Okay, so when I think about the small and mid-sized market and what I'm seeing now more on an anecdotal level, so a lot of what I was basing the first part of this conversation about on the big firm side was just the data that we're getting reported out. And by the way, I'll have several links to articles and some analysis in the show notes to this episode on some of those big law things. But on the small firm side, there's just not as much reporting, not as much data. And so it's a little bit harder to come up with kind of a good, scientific survey of any kind. But so what I'm about to kind of describe now is just what I'm now seeing from a personal level and anecdotal level. And that's just, again, similar to the big firms market, a very strong market with a lot of activity going on. I'm seeing opportunities in all of the major markets in Dallas and Houston and Austin, also in San Antonio. I've done a number of searches in San Antonio. And then I would say a very small handful, but still, noteworthy in East and West Texas. But really in the major markets of Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, and Houston, it has been a very active market. I would say it has been heavier on the litigation side I don't see as many of the transactional opportunities in the small and mid-sized firm market as on the litigation side. I mean, if I was just going to kind of think about the law firms that I'm working with right now and the candidates I'm working with right now, I would say I have fewer law firm opportunities for the candidates wanting to pursue corporate and transactional type work, and not enough candidates on the litigation side for the litigation opportunities that I have. So if that kind of gives you a picture of kind of what we're seeing right now, there's I think a good amount of litigation opportunities, and then some, but not enough on the corporate and transactional side. As far as compensation and salaries go, I see a wide range, honestly. I tend to not work with opportunities that are any less than $100,000. And then on the higher end, again, focused in on that small, mid-sized firm market, I would say kind of tapping out around 170, 175, and those are fairly unique cases. Most kind of tend to be in that 120 to 150 or 160 range. And again, if it's a firm that's working with, either insurance companies as clients or government as clients, or, on like the family law side, with some exceptions, those are going to tend to be, lower rates from clients and therefore lower pay to attorneys. It's just kind of how it works, right? That's just the business model. When the firms are working more with companies, and the larger the company, probably the larger the rates that they can pay, then likewise, the larger the attorney salary can be. And so as you kind of look at what types of companies, what size companies the law firms work with, that's going to help dictate what level of pay, what level of salary. Something else that I'm seeing is or feedback that I'm getting from employers, or things that they are looking for in their candidates. These aren't surprising. I just, as I was thinking about it and making notes prior to coming on here, just thinking about what I'm hearing most right now. And I would say that there is a preference for candidates who have not bounced around a lot. And I think I've mentioned that maybe on the other solo podcast, but it continues to come up. And I would just say that it's not something where they're necessarily disqualifying anyone for having been at 3 places in 4 years or something like that. But it certainly is either raising a red flag for them, or at least a concern, or it's something that they're telling me that, like, hey, if you've got somebody that's maybe been somewhere for a while, that would be great. So it's not like they're saying we have to have this, but I can just tell that, and usually the deal is something's happened. Like maybe they took a chance on someone that had been at several firms in just a few years and got burned by that person, and chalked it up to, hey, you know what, we knew we shouldn't have maybe done this. We knew they were a potential risk because they haven't made it past a year any of the other places, and we just thought maybe this would be different. It wasn't, and so now we're not going to do that anymore. I kind of get that vibe, or hear a similar kind of story to that fairly often. And so what does that mean? It means if you've been at the same place for 2, 3, 4 years, and haven't really bounced around very often, that's a strength for you. And I would, even if I'm not asked about it in an interview, I think I would highlight it, as a level of commitment, as a level of ability to stay employed, doing good enough work to keep your job, and not being someone who is always discontented with what they have in terms of work in front of them, and all of that. I think those are positive traits right now for law firms and for employers. And so, like I said, even if you're not asked about it, I think that's a strength that you have that you might not have realized. And so I would highlight it in interviews. And I can tell you that I highlight it when I submit like blind applications to firms. I'll say this person, has been with the same firm for the last 4 years or blah, blah, blah. I mention it because I think it's important. Of course, it's on the resume. Of course, when they see the years, they'll know, but still, I like to highlight it. On the flip side, if you are someone who has been, at several firms in just a couple of years or something like that, you just need to know that it may be that that's going to be at least a cause for concern from some potential employers. And so I think it's good to get out in front of it. And as soon as you can address, and talk through the reasons why you made the transitions that you did. And, I don't think it's about making up, some story or embellishing or, anything like that. I think it's just walking through why you did what you did. And also talking about why you feel like the place that you're interviewing with is a place that you could see yourself over a longer term. I think that's important. And so, you obviously don't want to, even if you are right to do so, you don't want to be bad-mouthing your former employers. There's just no real way to do that. That's positive help for you in an interview situation. But you can certainly talk about the things that you're interested in the firm that you're interviewing with, as why those are positives for you and why you're excited about them. But I do think you need to just know that if you've been a few places early in your career, it's not that you'll get, it's like I said, it's not that they're going to not look at you or not consider you. It's just probably going to be something that is a concern that needs to be addressed. The other thing that I want to mention on what I'm hearing from law firms and employers is that is similar to the last point, but is a potential strength for you. If you've been somewhere where you've been able to get a lot of that hands-on experience early on, maybe you've been able to take a couple depositions, you've been able to argue a motion at a hearing or something like that, been able to take a witness at a trial or an arbitration or something like that. Just, some things that maybe in the first few years that if you're at a large firm, a lot of times you're not going to get the chance to do. Even if you're at a smaller mid-sized firm, you may not get a chance to do, depending on how it's set up and structured. And for those of you that are, currently at a place where you're getting to do that, and maybe it's like, maybe it's at a really small firm and you're not making hardly any money, making, $72,000 or $78,000 or something like that. But you've got all this experience over a 2-year period of taking those depositions, taking those hearings, arguing those motions, putting those deals together, a lot of client interaction, a lot of client contact. That stuff is valuable. And so it's important to highlight that, both on your resume and within the interview. And so one of the things that I would mention about that is, I see a lot of resumes where in a situation like that, a candidate's had that kind of experience. I see a lot of resumes where the, experience section, the bullet under their current law firm, almost reads like the job description would read if that law firm had posted the position. So it's take depositions, argue motions, write motions, interview clients, like this list of job duties. And it's not that that's bad. It's not that that's wrong. It's just that it's a missed opportunity for you to really highlight all that you've actually done, because it just reads very general and very bland. Take the opportunity to go ahead and say, have taken and insert a number, have taken 23 fact deposition witnesses and 4 expert witnesses, and was second chair on a trial that got a motion for summary judgment on a blah, blah, blah. Actually talk through some of the specific experiences that you've had, the successes that you've had. I think about it from my athletic director days, and interviewing and looking at resumes of coaches. When we would have coaching vacancies come in, I would look at coaches. It'd be like the difference between, if they said they were, say a basketball coach, for the last 4 years at, such and such college. And they just, underneath their listing of the school that they worked for, they put things like led and directed a basketball team of 15 student athletes and oversaw a staff of 4 or 6 or whatever, and made travel arrangements and built the schedule and all of that. It's not that any of that's bad or wrong. That's great. It's how I would expect any basketball coach that's been at a college. That's the job description for sure. But what is it that you've done? I mean, so every coach's, for the most part, resume is going to come in and say, we've won 78% of our games or 83% of our games. We've graduated 98% of our student athletes in the 4 years that I've been here. We have had 23 all-conference players and 3 All-Americans. And we've done this and this, that, and that, and that, and that. I mean, you should see these coaches' resumes with all these numbers they can put on there. And some of that's just natural to the sport and world and to that. But I think there's very similar things on the lawyer side of things. You want to talk about what you've been able to do, what you've been able to accomplish in a real concrete way that doesn't just read like the job description of the job. And so if you can do that, especially for those of you that have been able to have the benefit of having that experience early in your career, that's going to help put you over the top in a lot of ways. Okay, the last one I want to mention is on relocation. I am working with several candidates that are looking to relocate and have placed a couple that have done so. So I want to talk about that a little bit because, sometimes I think candidates start to think that relocation makes sense for them. But when it comes down to it, it's actually something that they're not prepared to do. And so the first thing I would say is before you, like if say you live in Houston right now, before you say, hey, I want to move to Austin or I want to move to Dallas or whatever, really think that one through and make sure that's what you want to do. Make sure that if you're working with a recruiter that they know what you're thinking is there and what are the reasons why you want to do that. Because it's going to be important in sharing with prospective employers your rationale for wanting to relocate. And it can matter. Is it a personal thing? Like, do you have a spouse that maybe took a job somewhere or a sick family member that you're going to be caring for? Or is it just because of the legal market and you think you want to get involved more in some things that are happening in Austin or Dallas or Houston or whatever it might be? And it's not like there's a right answer to those questions, but you just need to have gone through the exercise of really thinking it through and then being able to communicate it effectively to the employer. Because for the most part, that's going to be a question that all of them have and wondering why you want to come here. And especially if you don't have, previous connections or ties to the city that you're wanting to move to, it's going to be even more important because their concern in their worst case scenario is you come there because you think you want to be there. And then 6 months or 12 months later, you're back wanting to move back to where you came from because it just wasn't what you thought it would be or whatever. And so, I think it's important to think through some of those things. But it can work out just fine. It can be actually a benefit in some cases, because there maybe are less potential for conflicts, potentially, especially if you're working in more of a niched field. It's hard sometimes to recruit people from firms that are in your same niche in the same city because it's a small circle and everyone knows one another, and it can create some issues. And so it's a lot of times easier, in fact, to recruit someone to come from another city who's not kind of in that inner circle and would cause problems by recruiting them away from one of the other firms in town. And so there can be some advantages to it for sure. And so I just want you to think through that and know that employers are thinking about that as well. All right. Our other topic for the day, I know we're already at like half an hour, so we're going quickly here on this last part. But just a few things on how to work productively with a legal recruiter. I just want to give you some thoughts there and some of the things I've been seeing over the past 6 months since I think I last did a solo show with you guys. So one of the things I want to encourage you to do is share what you're up to. Be open and honest in your communication. So I think, I think most recruiters, if we're honest with ourselves, know that you very likely are working with more than one recruiter. There's certainly nothing that prevents you from doing that, and nothing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Some other recruiters may disagree with me. I just don't have any expectation that you would put all of your eggs into one recruiter's basket, and so I just accept that as like that's just how it's going to go, and that's fine. And then you also may be applying directly to places. And so when you first start talking to a recruiter, one of the things I think is important is that you share what it is that you're up to, and especially share where, if any place that you've already applied to or that you've had direct communication with. And before you start making those direct connections, you want to think it through, because if you want to work with a recruiter, directly applying places basically cuts the recruiter out completely of that interaction. And that may be fine for you, but you just need to know that that's the case. So there have been occasions recently where a candidate has come to me and they've applied at a bunch of places, and some of them would have been places that I would have probably reached out to, others not. But it made it to where, okay, just know that I'm not going to be able to reach out to any of these firms or kind of help walk through or facilitate anything with any of these firms that you've reached out to, because they're just not going to work with a recruiter once they've had direct contact with you. They're just not going to do that. And so it's important, I think, for you to think through before you start directly applying to places. And really, if you want to use a recruiter, I would say limit the direct applications to those that you really know someone on the inside of that firm. You have a pre-existing relationship, and you can leverage that and help get yourself and your resume in front of the decision makers. That's where I think it makes complete sense to go directly to that firm. There's just nothing wrong with that. Sort of blanket applying via either search engines or firm websites, I just don't, if you're doing that, then I think you're kind of on your own in your job search in a lot of ways, because that's not allowing for a recruiter to engage with the firm and do what they do well, and getting you to the top of the resume stacks and talking with the recruiters and all, at the firms and all of that. So I would say, be thoughtful about where you apply directly, and then whatever you do, share that with the legal recruiter so they can know where to avoid, because you can't go to those firms now. But the other thing about that is I think it also shows the recruiter what it is that you're looking for. So if you tell me you've applied at this firm, that firm, and that firm, that gives me a pretty good specific area of firms and practice areas to look for. And so I think that's going to be a positive to know that information. It's one thing for you to tell me kind of generally what you're looking for, but when I know that you've applied to a couple of firms I'm familiar with, and that is going to give me some information about what it is that you're really looking for that's going to be helpful. And so that's something to keep in mind. Also, let us know as recruiters what it is specifically that you're looking for in detail. And, sometimes I see this happen where a candidate has shared with me what they want to do, and then I'm kind of on the lookout for those opportunities. And then the next thing I see is they've taken a position that is not one of the things that they said they wanted to do. And I feel bad because I wasn't able to help them. I wasn't even looking for the thing that they ultimately decided to take. So I feel bad because maybe I could have helped them find something sooner. Maybe I could have helped them find something in that area, but that was better than what they wound up with. Maybe not, but I didn't really get the chance because I was looking for other things that they had told me that they wanted, and it turned out that they were really interested in something else, or maybe they just decided to settle for something else. But that's tough because we didn't really get a chance to work together in the most productive way. And so, recognizing, of course, that things change, that maybe after a month or two, you're going down one road, you say, you know what, I want to broaden this out a little bit. Maybe I am open to Houston. I wasn't before, or maybe I am open to insurance defense. I wasn't before. And that's fine. That's just something that, again, with having that open communication with the recruiter, we can counsel you through. We can talk that through with you, and then we can make the change in the types of opportunities we're on the lookout for you. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And the last thing, and that is, and this has happened a few times this year, and so I was wanting to specifically highlight this. Talk with your recruiter before you respond to an offer. So how might this play out? Every firm, especially when dealing with small and mid-sized firms, can be a little bit of the Wild West in terms of how things are done. If it's big firm world, everybody kind of does the same thing, you kind of know what you're in for. But on the small mid-sized firm, it can kind of be all over the place. And so even if the recruiter has been the one kind of coordinating and directing the communication between the firm and the candidate, sometimes when you get to the offer stage, the firm goes ahead and puts together an offer or an offer letter and either makes a call to the candidate or sends an offer to the candidate by email directly and not including the recruiter. And so my encouragement to you as the candidate is in that situation to forward that offer letter to the recruiter or go ahead and set up a call with your recruiter so that you can talk through the offer and talk through whether we feel like it's a fair offer, a competitive offer, whether it's an offer that is worth considering or worth countering or worth accepting or anything like that. It's been unfortunate, I think, to watch candidates sometimes just out of excitement, maybe out of fear of losing the offer, to just sort of immediately either accept or immediately respond with a counter that's really not asking for a whole lot more, and doing it outside of outside of my knowledge as the recruiter. It's ultimately as the candidate, it's ultimately your decision and it's your career and it's your offer, obviously. And so you're entitled to do with it what you want. But I think as recruiters, we have a lot of, historical knowledge of the firm, knowledge of offers, see where the, market knowledge, all of that to be able to bring to a conversation about what's the best move forward here with these offers. And so, I just would encourage you to, when you receive an offer, just take a moment, take a deep breath, and then schedule a call or text to your recruiter and let's talk through it, because it may be that it's, hey, this is a great offer. I don't think they're going anywhere with it up from here. You should just take it because this is great. This is higher than market. Good for you. Just go for it. That might be the case, but a lot of times that's not the case. And a lot of times we can talk through some of the options. And I may even know, hey, is the firm more are they more apt to move on salary? Are they more apt to move on bonus or bonus structure? Are they more apt to move on signing bonuses or moving expenses? What's sort of the, we have a number of levers that we can potentially pull from here. And for this firm in this situation, what makes the most sense? And if we don't get to have that conversation before the candidate makes a counteroffer or accepts or declines or whatever it might be, we've just missed an opportunity to make the best decision possible there. So I would encourage you to think through that as well. All right. Well, I am so grateful to have had the chance to just come on here, talk through some of these issues with you. If you'd like to talk more and you'd like to learn more and hear more and just bounce some ideas or anything like that, please do reach out to me, Daniel@varsitysearch.com. Would love to connect with you on email. We can schedule a time to call. If you just go to varsitysearch.com/lawyer, there's places on there where you can just book a time into my calendar and we can have a call or a Zoom or whatever is comfortable for you. Would love to talk through any of these. issues with you, and look forward to talking with you again next week. I'm sorry, not next week. Next week is Labor Day. We will be off, so there will not be a show next week on Labor Day. But I wish you a happy Labor Day and holiday, and as we kind of get kick-started into the fall here. But we will be back with with guests after Labor Day, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. All right. Thanks so much, and we will talk to you soon.